to talk about it Tuesday. And inflation is something we are all dealing with right now. And this question deals with that and, talks about what steps we should take. So check this out. Prices of food, gas, and everything else are going through the roof. Experts say it's transitory. So should I adjust my monthly savings or keep it the same? Oh, I love that question because it's very strategic. It's what should I do? And most people don't even consider their monthly savings. But let's just look at a couple of things. So inflation, we're all seeing it. Gas prices, food prices, like they said, everything, is high price, and it's harder and harder to get certain things that we're used to getting. And what is causing it first? Let's just deal with that, because I think the cause will really let us determine whether or not it's transitory and will dictate what steps we take. So the pandemic has really brought to light some serious problems in the logistics of supply, right? And so there are two issues that are really affecting inflation. So we have labor issues, right? Labor shortage, and we have a supply shortage. Now, the funny thing is we have no shortage of people to fill the labor. And I think that will resolve itself a lot more easily and sooner than the supply issue, right? People are starting to go back to work. The numbers of people filing for unemployment have gone down every single month. And I think that will not be as big an issue as the supply issue. Now you're saying, but how do we have a supply issue? We don't really have a supply issue. We have a logistics issue. So there are ships, and I'm talking about hundreds of ships sitting off the coast, the West Coast by the port, that are unable to unload their cargo. The ports are stacked with cargo that they are unable to ship to wholesalers. So wholesalers don't have supply to ship to retailers, so retailers don't have supply to ship to you. And you're like, well, okay, that seems easy to resolve. It is not. Part of the issue is the truckers are unable to dump their empty containers at the dock because the dock is full, so they can't pick up new containers. And so they can't pick up new containers, so the dock can't unload the ships. It's this weird, vicious cycle. And nobody's been able to figure out a way to resolve it and untie this bottleneck. So is it transitory? Yes, I believe it's transitory, but transitory, that's a relative kind of term, right? How long is transitory? Are we talking 6 months? Are we talking about a year? Are we talking about longer? Because until they can figure out the logistics issue, the supply will still sit off the coast, unable to be unloaded, which means it can't get into the stores. And, at some point, the demand will drop, and then maybe inflation becomes permanent. But at this point, it looks transitory. We can maybe say 6 months, maybe a year. So the question is, what do you do with your savings? How do you adjust? So this idea of savings, some people look at savings differently. I'm not sure if they're looking at savings as their investments or they're looking at savings as their emergency fund, but I'll address both. So if you have an emergency fund, most people like to keep in an emergency fund about 3 to 6 months worth of their expenses. Now, if inflation is high, that means your expenses have probably gone up. So that means the current emergency fund that you have is probably inadequate, meaning that if something happened where you were unable to bring in income, it could not sustain you for 3 to 6 months, whichever one you chose, because your expenses have gone up. So should you make the adjustment? Absolutely. Make an adjustment to your emergency fund to reflect your current budget, right? What you currently have to spend every single month to maintain the lifestyle that you have. As far as your investments, should you make an adjustment there? Do you have to put in more? Not necessarily, because as part of your investment strategy, you should have been calculating in inflation. I don't think you should calculate the cost of inflation right now because it's extremely high, but you should have been calculating in 3% annually, maybe some people 4% annually, so that if you average it out over time, when it goes back down, because there are times it goes well below 3%. The Feds like to keep it at 2%. You'll be fine. But what you invest in, you should probably really reevaluate right now. So there are some businesses. So if you hold stocks, for instance, there are some companies that will be seriously impacted because of the supply shortage. So they won't make their sales, which means their profits will go down, at least temporarily. So maybe you want to scale back on those for a while. There are some companies that will profit wildly because they're able to adjust for inflation and pass that on to the consumers, and so they'll either maintain or even increase their profits. So you'll make money there. You should consider in your area, if real estate is growing, if you see a lot of new homes being built, a lot of sales happening, invest in real estate perhaps. If you see rental income going up, meaning that the cost of renting goes up, perhaps you can invest there. So should you make adjustments in your investing because of inflation? Absolutely, right? Take advantage of the opportunities that inflation gives, but also protect yourself against the harm that inflation can do in regards to your investing. As far as your savings, again, if it's in your emergency fund, you have to make the adjustment. Now, if the inflation is transitory in your emergency fund, if it goes back down and your monthly expenses go down, then you should reduce your emergency fund. You shouldn't have that cash just sitting there. Take that excess that you had put in before and invest it. So I love the question. Great question. Inflation is here. We do have to make some adjustments. If you guys have some suggestions, please add them to the comments. Keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.